Hello.
Hey,
Hey,
Kristen,
hi.
how are you?
Good. I know some people are going to watch on the recording, so I'm not sure how many people will show up, but I'm just going to get started. How are you, Eileen? I didn't ask you that back.
Good. I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Good. Okay. Hi, Caitlin. You're probably sleeping with your babe or trying to get her down or something like that. All right, ladies. Oh no, you're in the car. Oh, you're on mute. I don't know if you said something, but you did wave, and you look very stylish with those sunglasses, I have to say. That's awesome. All right. I am going to start with prayer and I'm going to share my screen um and then we'll just head in from there. Lots of things to cover today. Oh, I feel like my earrings on wonky. It's okay. We'll live with that. Okay, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. Lord, I thank you for the gift of just opening up our minds and our hearts to you. I thank you for the skill of awareness that we're gaining here on top of the skill of how to set boundaries. I know that boundaries in our lives create more freedom, create more peace, allow us to step into who you created us to be. I pray, Lord, that today these points would just be a beginning point for the women here, that they would be able to just harvest and learn and gather just so many takeaways that you want to show them. And Mother Mary, we ask for your intercession as we pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. All right, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. I am going to share my screen. And let's see here. There we go. All right. The skill of drawing boundaries. I feel like I've been waiting to teach this for a little while. So I hope that it serves you. And I hope that, you find a lot of good nuggets out of all the awareness that you're going to gain here. And hopefully skill and strategy and all the things. Okay. Boundaries. What does it mean to draw boundaries? Personal boundaries are the limits and rules that we set for ourselves within relationships. And I want to clarify this. I today am going to talk a lot about like relationships with other people. I will allude to and talk a little bit more about the relationship with that we have with ourselves. So it's like boundaries that we have with ourselves, but also relationships, that we have outside of ourselves. And boundaries help us to contribute meaningful to these relationships in our lives without, and really, I highlighted these words, without compromising our peace or our standards. So clear boundaries allow for us to rise into the saint that we are called to be. They create a capacity within us to have a sustained generosity, a sustained ability to build virtue, a sustained ability to tap into just what our Lord is calling us to and our purpose and our meaning. A couple examples with this, I'll hopefully be integrating just a lot of examples throughout the way, but um, boundary, against making commitments on a Sunday, which can be a very good thing. And it's not that everyone needs to not teach catechism on Sundays or whatever it might be, but it's when we decide, like if we wanted to create a boundary, against this, that we just don't take on any commitments on Sundays so that we have time to rest and to pray and time for our family. Boundary against a friend who gossips, because we know that like gossiping pretty much, I don't know if it's 100% true, but leads us to sinning. We're not supposed to gossip. So boundaries around these things that allow us to have a capacity to contribute, to grow in virtue, and to be the saint that we're called to be. Okay, I just want to touch on this really briefly, just boundaries in our world today. And this might be obvious, but it's always good to point these things out to just our brains of like, why? Why is it harder in this day, in this time? In the 90s, the cell phones were introduced, and it was just the beginning of like this availability that like caused all of these distractions in our lives. And it began to create the loss of the present moment. I'm sure there were other ways that we could, created that, but it was in such a magnified way. And, the 2000, um, social media came, and we're so used to it, maybe now, maybe some more than others. But really it launched, a mass marketing of advertising our failures and our insecurities. I also think social media can be very much used for good, but we have to, this is one of the pitfalls of it as well. And then it also launched us into this perfection metric, that was introduced as the norm. That, if we're immersed in this social media world, that we're just always seeing the best of every situation, of every, home or corner that they're presenting. And then today, this multi-generational crisis of overwhelm, of anxiety, of insecurity. And even it's created like mental prisons for us, confusion about who we are and our purpose. And also creating like this constant state of comparison and competition. And so just knowing our world today, it's so important to kind of take these boundaries with all of these, like of where we're living right now. Because the saints of before, who we admire and we love and we look to, they had similar challenges, but we have new challenges. And so we need to be mindful of that. Okay, the state of our culture when it comes to drawing boundaries. Again, boundaries are not that, well understood in our culture today. We're told to create boundaries, but don't ever make people feel uncomfortable. We're told to create boundaries, but don't ever say a word that could be interpreted as unkind or, in any way that makes people feel uncomfortable. We complain about boundaries and how hard it is, but we don't have the training on how to learn how to draw boundaries. So hopefully this is what you're going to be gaining today. And I want to preface this too, as you're gaining this today, that when you're learning something, even if, boundaries have been around for a long time, we hear a lot about it. There's lots of books that have been written about it. There's lots of resources that you can have. But, this is training on it. And to train on something means, I want you to hear this, that you can't expect to draw boundaries perfectly on the first, the second, the third, the fourth, or even the 10th try. It's, it's not going to come perfectly for you if for the last 30, 40 years, it's something that you haven't really put into practice. And so we really need to like hold ourselves, love ourselves, and like give us mercy and grace to to really grow in this skill and to know that we're not going to do it perfectly on the first try. I wanted to share just a personal example for me when I first dove into really this like kind of Catholic personal development type world and existence. When I was introduced to the women's school, I knew right away that one of the things that was really holding me down was my inability to draw boundaries. And it was specifically with my family, not my immediate, like not my little like unit with Matt and the kids, but my family that lives very close to me, who I love, and they're wonderful, wonderful people. But I knew that I needed to start boundaries, and there was some very specific situations for us and for our family. And I began to do that. And it was a process of like 2 years. And I did not do it perfectly at first. I think I hurt some feelings. They weren't used to me drawing boundaries. So naturally, they got their feelings hurt, or me saying no, or this wasn't good for our kids, or my kids aren't allowed to do this. These things that I had just kind of gone with because I didn't want to go against, make a rub, or go against the flow, or make conflict, because I naturally like harmony and peace. And so for me, in drawing boundaries, it was like a 2-year process for me. And I began to do it. I'm kind of a quick action taker, so I began to do it quickly. But now those boundaries are set in place. And I can say that after these couple years of doing it, and again, we live close to my family, that it's created a more healthy environment for my core and inner circle, which is, my husband and our kids. And we're constantly recalibrating this as well. So you can't expect to draw boundaries perfectly on the first try, second, 10th, or 20th sometimes, and it's always a recalibrating. I put a couple more examples of like our kids, talk to us disrespectfully and then we scream back and then we don't follow through on consequences because we don't want them to suffer. We don't want them to feel uncomfortable. I'll find myself doing that. I'll ground them from something and then I'm like, oh my gosh, but they have this thing and then they're going to be not included in it, and it's just like, no, I set a boundary or set appropriate boundaries, like to do what I say I'm going to do. We don't, say anything to our friend who said something mean about someone, because we don't want to hurt her feelings, but we become resentful. And then we end up talking behind her back, to our mom or our sister or another friend. So it's a cycle of, that boundaries haven't really been taught very well or enforced in our culture today. Okay, boundary setting requirements. It requires communication. If, we don't have the script to communicate our boundaries, it makes life really, really hard. So even hopefully I'll be giving you some scripts today that you can take and kind of harvest from. And we'll, even in our next like coaching session together, we can even talk about some more. But like this, an example like this, I'm so grateful that you are here. Please don't talk about politics. It just isn't the environment that I'm wanting right now. And maybe you don't say that in front of everyone, but like you pull them aside and you say it, or you say it, before they even come over, if you know that this is going to be something that's going to be problematic. It's a retraining of feeling bad. Okay. We know this, but we don't know how to live it. We know that we need to say to a friend no who invited us, even if it was something grand and great, but we feel bad, so we don't say no. And then it creates chaos in our own lives. We try to please everyone, again, because we don't want to feel bad, or we don't want them to feel bad, because when they feel bad, then we feel bad. And then we end up overwhelmed and unhappy. And even not able to like really live out the dream that we're going towards or the goals that we're going towards. It requires us to not make excuses. We compromise on things that are important to us, and that, then we make excuses for not drawing the boundaries that we have set out to draw. And ladies, compromising on the things that are important to us, it's sometimes that's habitual in us. I do that. So my dinner time and my after school time is sacred. However, I see someone at the grocery store and it's just skill after skill. Of course, I'm not going to be rude to someone. I love saying hi to people. I love but instead of talking for 20 minutes, maybe it's a boundary, hey, of cutting off after like 2 or 3, 4 minutes. I would love to talk more, but I'm totally have to get back, to making dinner. So it's having, not making excuses. Well, I'm just an outgoing person. It's like, no, I can set scripts and I can set boundaries in place for me that guard my peace and my family. Don't speak up when someone speaks rudely to us. Then again, we hold resentment of the other person. And then the other person thinks that their behavior is justified. And it creates, just this cycle that begins like, we didn't say anything, so we become resentful. And then the other person thinks it's like, oh, my behavior was okay. They didn't seem to mind too much. And so drawing, boundaries and not making excuses about it actually creates more harmony within our relationships, even though like the upfront of it can be challenging and can be more difficult. I love this. I don't know if you guys have ever read anything by Brené Brown, but she's just an awesome author. And she talks a lot about choosing courage over resentment. When we are courageous and choose that, it bades off for us these feelings of resentment, which is so, so important. Okay, self-doubt. It requires us that we don't doubt our value, that our value is, we doubt our value as unconditional. Sorry, I was like, did I write that wrong? Our value is unconditional. So drawing a boundary can bring in this fear of rejection. Well, what are they going to think? What are they going to say? What's going to happen here? And so, it requires us, not to have this self, doubt, to even, within, for our children, we don't have boundaries for our children because we're afraid of what they're going to say or they're going to think, like, mom, you're such a mean mom, or you're the only mom that does this, or we never have any fun over here, or whatever it is. And so we need to stop self-doubting ourselves that, no, we're creating these boundaries for our kids because A, we want them to get to heaven, and B, we're in charge of their training and their formation, and C, it's what God is calling us to do. Those are the exact words that I'll use for my kids when they say that. I'm like, guys, I have to do what God is asking me to do, just like you have to do what God is asking you to do. And right now, that means we don't watch movies like that. I know without a shadow of a doubt that as a mom, I'm not called or want to or supposed to allow you to watch that. I know it's hard because all your friends do it. Just explaining that this is my call as a mom as well. Okay, I want to reiterate this. I know I said it kind of at the beginning, but kind of just going back to the purpose of drawing boundaries. Okay, boundaries help to keep us safe in the context of our relationships. I have this written out, a couple different times in this training because I want you to get that into your mind. I want you to get it into your subconscious so it just comes to your conscious, that like when you are setting boundaries, they are actually there to keep you safe within the context of your relationships. They stop us from compromising on our principles and ensure that our relationships remain healthy and whole. Even going back to like setting, boundaries with my family, for me, it was a way in which to keep those relationships healthy and whole, so that I don't be like, oh, all of a sudden, like, we're just not going to be in a relationship anymore. That's what happens when we don't set the boundaries that are appropriate. Okay, safety and health, they provide this. Although it can sometimes feel that boundaries limit our ability to participate in relationships, they're actually what are essential for maintaining healthy connections with others. And sometimes there's different seasons. I mean, when we're in a season with lots of littles, we have to determine, which relationships are most important at that time, and which relationships are most important to maintain that healthy connection in what we need. Okay. And boundaries are a way of showing ourselves respect and ensuring that our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health is being maintained. Because we know that when we're not maintaining our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health, that we have little capacity to give. That it actually makes us more selfish because we're in survival mode and we can't see past the survival mode into giving of ourselves to others. Okay, boundaries are not, just reiterating this, setting boundaries does not mean that you're being mean or unkind. We have to continue to remind ourselves of that. Saying no can be one of the kindest things that you do for someone. It actually allows them the ability to rise, to recalibrate, to find someone else, to dig deep within themselves. Okay. And we get the behavior that we are willing to tolerate. I want to share this with you. Sometimes I'll run a little late, and some people tolerate that and others don't. I was in a meeting once, or had a meeting, and I think I arrived 5 minutes late, and they were like, I'm sorry, Kristen, I can't meet anymore. Like, they were on a strict schedule. And you know what? The next time and every time that I've met with them since, I've always been early because that's a standard. They showed me what they were willing to tolerate. Am I still late for other people? Yes, I am. Do I work on that? Yes, I do. But we teach people what we're willing to tolerate. And there are certain people that I'm like, oh, Even like when, being friends with January, who, does this work and is so like when I'm with her, there is no room for gossip. I'm not a huge gossiper anyways. I think I can fall more into that maybe with like my mom or my sister or some of them really, really close to. And I'll use a caveat now of saying, I don't know if it's a caveat, but it's just like permission to share my heart, permission to share like vulnerably, like if you've been hurt or, you're going to bring up some things that someone else did to you. But there's certain friends going back to like January that like I just don't gossip with her, like pretty much ever. And if I do, she'll say or I'll say like permission to share my heart, candidly, because sometimes it's hard to find like the exact right words. So we treat others how to treat us as well. What do I mean by that? I'm sorry, we teach others how to treat us. Because if we have a boundary, then it actually teaches that person how to treat us. And so if our kids are super disrespectful to us, obviously it's a skill and we're learning this here, but we've actually taught them that by not keeping boundaries. Does that make sense? Even someone at work who treats us or talks to us in a tone or asks too much of us or asks for ample hours after work that we're not getting paid for, like we have to teach others how to treat us. Okay. Purpose of boundaries. Number one, again, going over this, like, is for the quality of our relationships. Boundaries help to keep us safe in the context of our relationships. Again, I'm saying it again. They stop us from compromising on our standards to ensure that we have these healthy, sustainable relationships. Example, you have a friend or let's say family member or even your husband that is criticizing you and you give, and you don't give a clear boundary. This then leads to resentment. Um, I actually just had that in my family. I actually like to poke fun at myself. So I've always have, it just doesn't really bother me. I just, in a like lighthearted sense. And so my family's used to doing that because it doesn't really bother me. But sometimes if they cross over the line or they're doing it too much, or they do it in front of other people, I don't like that. I begin to not like that. And so I'll have to speak up. Hey guys, it actually really hurts my feelings when you do that like multiple times in front of other people. Like setting about like just don't do that, please, anymore when your friends are over or whatnot. And so that protects the quality of my relationship with my husband, with my kids, with my dad, with my mom, with my friends. So that it doesn't lead to resentment. You know, we can say to our children, please don't speak to me in that disrespectful tone. This protects you growing angry and resentful and really trains them on how to communicate. And so for me, when I speak those words to my kids, especially like my teens are, I do think like as they're going through the teen years, it's easy to become like to not be trained in this, all the hormones, everything that's going on. And so it's a constant retraining of like, hey guys, you don't speak to me in that disrespectful tone. I will not tolerate that. If you do, you're going to have to go up to your room, or if you do, you're not going to be able to go out. Whatever that consequence it is, so that it preserves my relationship. So I'm not thinking, oh, kid is just such a brat, or just my kid is just so annoying. It helps me to see them because I'm setting these boundaries and helps me not to get upset. Okay, without boundaries, we create chaos within us and around us. You could even say it's a strong word, but like we create monsters within us or around us. Setting boundaries has everything to do with allowing others to become the best versions of themselves. And boundaries allow us to become the woman of courage that we're called to be, where we're not holding all of these things in and then one day we just explode. Okay, so it allows us to become women of courage. And and believe me, when I say a woman of courage, like it's to become a leader. We're all called to be leaders. We're all called to be women of courage. And we're able to bring things into the light instead of letting them fester in the dark. And we know what happens, you know, you take something and you keep it in the dark, let's even say food, all this mold, all this grimy stuff, all the, it begins to stink and it's gross and it's yucky and no one wants to touch it anymore. And so we have to bring those things to the light so that we can create more peace within us and around us. Okay, number 2 about the purpose of setting boundaries is for sustained generosity. What does that mean? Boundaries set our limit that allows us to have this sustained generosity, the sustained peace, the sustained ability to be the mother, to be the wife, to be the woman that we are called to be. If you don't communicate boundaries, you won't be able to give to those around you and the things that we love. And the things that we love, what do? They tell us and point us to who we are. And so if we are in a constant state of overwhelm because we're not drawing boundaries, we're not able to do those things. Even this, like a simple example, like if I say yes to every coffee date that comes my way, which believe me, I want to do. And I'm again working on that. Some people don't even have time for coffee dates, but you know what I mean? Like every get together, you can insert whatever it is for your life, even every play group. Um, but if I say yes to everything, or going out, with friends on a Friday night, I'm unable to then sometimes serve my family the way that I want to. I'm unable, let's say if you're going out on every Friday and Saturday night of the weekend, to get up in the mornings like I want to be able to do. Um, if I'm able to set boundaries and communicate that, like I get mad at my children for sleeping in every day of the weekend. This does not happen over here because I've set a boundary. There are certain days when my son comes home and he's played a football game and he's gotten super late. Like he totally has permission, which actually he doesn't usually do because he's so trained. He has a business that he runs, just even as a 17-year-old that he'll get up and do. But there are times that he's like, Mom, I need to sleep. I'm sleeping in. I'm like, of course you do. So there are times to break that. But if we don't, hold them accountable for what we're wanting, then they're not contributing at home. And then we get frustrated and then our house is a mess and like the spiral, begins. And so even communicating, these boundaries allows us to have a generous heart to our children. Um, and even committing to ministry outside of the home. I love doing ministry. I love doing retreats. I love doing whatever it might be. And I've done that. I've been a youth minister with little kids in tow, or in tow. And one of the boundaries I had for it when I took the job is like, hey, I'm going to be bringing all of my 4 kids with me. Is that going to be a problem? Because if it is, you don't, they're like, no, we want your kids there. It's not going to be perfect because I'm going to have my kids with me and I'm going to be doing this and that. And so, but committing even to ministry outside of the home, you're able, sometimes if you're over committing or over, not setting that boundary, protect the quality time that you have with your husband or your family or whatever that need might be. Our capacity for rising into the woman, into the wife that we are called to be is in direct proportion to our capacity to hold true to our boundaries. There is no sustained peace without boundaries. Okay, I want you to just like pause, and that's a lot. That's a mouthful right there, but like how true this is. Our capacity for rising into the woman, the wife, the mother that we are called to be is in direct proportion to our capacity to hold true to our boundaries. There is no sustained peace without boundaries. Okay, number 3, the purpose is to honor our value. Boundaries help us to honor our commitment to what we value and who God has made us to be. It's our way of respecting ourselves and honoring the needs of our particular season of life. Why do we honor that? Because we are worthy of being honored because God created us as amazing, beautiful women. And he asks us and wants us to honor that. A couple examples, even, if labels are put on you, I'm asking you not to label me because it really hurts me and I feel devalued, whether it's from your kids, your husband, your parents, friend, even in this season, like this particular season right now, I just had a baby. I'm drawing boundaries from people who are critical of me. So I choose not to be around them. I know for me, after I have a baby, I really have to guard who I'm around from negative thinking. Because I really, throughout all of my pregnancies and then through postpartum, I struggled with, um, just being that postpartum depression. And so for me, it was always like right now, I just had a baby and I really would guard myself from people who were negative or people who complained or people who weren't uplifting. It wasn't that I never hung out with people who weren't positive again, but I knew in that particular time for me to be the mom and the wife that I was called to be, that I needed to create this circle around me that was really uplifting because I was struggling during that time with the postpartum depression. Even when we're going after a particular dream, I'm choosing to not, surround myself with people who make fun of it, or I choose not to share my dream. That's why we protect our dreams because, it can be a boundary that crosses over and then, inhibits me from living out the dream or the call that our Lord is, asking me to have. I wanted to make a moment just like of clarity right now so that you can see this that um, well, first we need to communicate our boundary. I'll go into this a little bit later. And then we hold people accountable. So if we don't communicate our boundary, it's hard to hold people accountable, right? We can be like, you're not supposed to be doing that. Oh, wait, I forgot to actually tell you that. Like you're not allowed to talk to me that way. So first it's communicating and then it's holding people accountable. Okay. What are the consequences for not holding boundaries, for our lack of boundaries? Number one, resentment. You know, even, I have here like your dad, if your dad was labeling you, like instead, saying, could you please stop that? Because if you don't, it leads to resentfulness. I don't know why it says to quest. I must have been wanting to say something else there, but like what it does is it leads to resentfulness, like when labels are put on us. I even have an example, with my dad. Whenever he spoke to me, he's very passionate about politics and he's very passionate about, um, lots, everything he's passionate about, but mostly about politics. And this particular area, when he would talk to me, I was able to tell, like, I never wanted to stay around because it always made me feel stupid. I don't even like the word stupid, but it just made me feel so stupid. So, when my dad started talking to me one day, I said to him, Dad, he was just like asking me these questions that wasn't even giving me time to respond. Acting like I just didn't know anything that I was talking about. And I said, Dad, when you speak to me like that, it makes me feel like a little kid. It makes me feel really stupid. And it makes me not want to be in conversation with you. Is that how you're meaning to make me feel? And it stopped him. And I didn't know how he was going to respond because it was like such a like habitual thing. Like when my dad gets really impassioned about something. And he was like, oh, no, I, I didn't mean to make you feel, I don't mean to make you feel that way. I'm like, well, when you speak to me like that, and I was giving him examples, like it really makes me, it closes my heart off to you. I don't want to share in these, situations. He's like, oh, okay. I can't say that it's been perfect from then, but that I began to set this boundary. Like, you can't speak to me like that because when you do, it closes my heart off and I'm just going to walk away. And being able to do that instead of being resentful of him, like my dad always talks to me like this. And it's setting a boundary so that I don't feel that way. And when he doesn't respect that, I literally walk away now because it doesn't do me any good. And it's probably not doing him any good either because I'm just sitting there fuming and mad at him. Okay, number two, what are the consequences? You become judgmental. You jump to conclusions instead of saying, stop talking about politics at dinner or stop talking about other people at dinner. We then begin to judge them. We're like, oh, they're so like this, da 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 da. And so lack of it, makes you judgmental. It also can lead to consequences is self-doubt. Someone calls us a mess. Oh, you're just such a mess all the time, or you're so anxious, or, even for me, I just remember, being called like someone who couldn't make decisions. It leads to like that you begin to believe, those labels instead of saying like, hey, can you please not call me that? Because that's not who I am. I'm actually a woman who is really working on guarding her peace. I'm actually, a woman of courage. Those things might feel awkward to say, but like asking people to stop, because that's not a label that I hold for myself. It can also lead to frustration. When we don't draw boundaries around activities, we start to begin to become frustrated and resentful because we're doing too much. And then we're resentful and frustrated at all the people that are around us. I know for me, when I take on too much and I become frustrated, I actually start to blame my husband. I'm like, it's because of you that I did this. It actually has nothing to do with him. Um, and then we become another consequence is we become exhausted. We keep saying yes when our cup is empty. And we know the script that we choose to live, a life by design and not by default. And when our cup is empty, we're living by default. We get run down and we're unable to contribute to the present moment. And we're called to contribute to the present moment. We're called to be in the present moment. And we become emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually exhausted, which leads us into overwhelm, which leads us into anxiety, depression, which leads us into not being able to tap into who God made us to be. Okay. The ultimate, um, lack of boundaries robs us of our peace. Why? Because it creates depletion in us. And then when we're depleted, it creates division. It creates division within inside of us because we're like rubbing against, like, I want to be this great mom, but I'm totally overwhelmed right now. I want to love my kids, but I'm just not able to. Or I want to love my husband, but I have 800 things that I committed to, and I'm not even able to spend time with them. So, it robs us of our peace. That's the ultimate of consequence um, of lack of boundaries, is that it robs us of our peace. Okay, 4 ways to draw boundaries. Hopefully, this is going to be things that like you're like, oh yeah, I can do these. These are things that I've been learning all along the way. So number 1, have a strategy. There's lots of ways in which to gain strategies on drawing boundaries. Maybe at some point we could just even share some books that we've read. Maybe I'll, even when I send out, the follow-up email to this, just share some books that I have found particularly helpful with strategy. But drawing boundaries requires us to be strategic, okay? And identifying which boundaries to draw, when to draw them, and how to draw them. Now, if we're trying to create, it's like anything, we're like, okay, I'm going to draw a boundary for every single thing that's going on in my life. Maybe you can do that, but maybe you can't. Maybe we start with just one area. Maybe it's our family. Maybe it's our kids. Maybe it's our husband. Maybe it's this one friend that's just draining all of the energy out of us because we haven't set a boundary. I'm strategic in order to be more loving. I love this when it comes to strategy, is just saying that, like, why are we strategic? Oh, yeah, it's in order to be more loving. It's in order to be more peaceful. It's in order to be able to give more of myself. The goal is to create more unity, not to create walls. So boundaries, we think of them as just like setting up this wall, which we can do. And boundaries do create, like it's like a wall, but that's actually to create more unity, to create more peace. When we are not strategic about how we draw boundaries, they become inconsistent and random. So at one point we're doing this and then we're doing this, and we can see that most, I think it's easiest to see that with our kids. Like one day we're just letting them color on the walls, and the next we're like, oh my gosh, every single thing in the house needs to be clean. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but being strategic helps to eliminate that inconsistency and that randomness, because those are confusing to those around us. And when we communicate in that way, people don't take us seriously. I even had my kids call me out on that. They're like, mom, my older kids would call me out with my younger kids, like, well, you told them like that they weren't allowed to do X, Y, and Z, and you're not even enforcing it. So why do you even say that? And I'm like, you're right. So sorry. I'm going to, be better with this boundary here. And even as you catch yourself, I mean, I'm always catching myself. That's why it's so important to be like, there's a lot going on. And when we catch ourselves not creating or holding the boundary, okay, it's just time to recalibrate. We need to, when it comes to strategy, consider the most effective way to communicate our boundary. Example, just showing the impact of it. I want to share with you how your words are impacting me. So that's such a great way of setting a boundary of like, when you speak in that tone, it really turns me off from you. When you speak in that tone, it actually triggers me to just like really be upset, and I can work on that, but your tone is triggering that. We can say that to the people that we love, to the people that, that we want to be in relationship with. Number two, have a script. Most of the time, we just don't know what to say. And this is an art, and this comes with practice. You can have certain scripts and you can memorize them absolutely 100%. But even knowing what to say takes practice, whether you practice in the mirror, whether you practice doing it just on the spot. Okay. Even like when I first spoke those words to my dad, I remember thinking about those for a while. And then when I said them, I don't know if they came out perfectly, but I had practiced them and I did the best that I could in that moment. So communicating a boundary is an essential part of drawing a boundary, and we need to be strategic with our words and our tonality. Scripting helps us to master the skill of drawing boundaries by practicing that effective communication. Knowing what to say, plus being hyper aware that your boundaries are being crossed. So half of the battle is knowing what to say. Half of the battle is just this awareness that your boundaries are actually being crossed. Okay, does that make sense? Those are both a part of it. And then the ultimate gift that we're always working on is being detached from the outcome. Knowing what to say, being hyper, aware that our boundaries are being crossed, and then the gift is being detached from the outcome because they might not respond with how we want them to respond. Because so we always have to keep that in mind of that gift of being okay, but I'm detached from the outcome. This is what I'm working on. This is what I'm going to say, and then I'm detached from the outcome. Script. When you do this, it makes me feel blank. Is this what you are meaning to do? Is this your intention? It's a really great way of like scripting that out. Um, when you do this, another way is like when you talk in this way, or when you use demeaning words, or when you're super angry, even that, like it might not make me feel safe. But when you do this, whatever this is, I'm no longer going to stay in the conversation. I just want you to know that I'm going to walk away because it's not good for me. It doesn't keep me peaceful. So when you decide to, not do this or speak in a different tone, then we can come back together. Another one, I find sarcasm to be hurtful. I would like to ask you to stop using it around me. Thank you for respecting this. Some people might not mind sarcasm. There's lots of different like sayings about what sarcasm is. I actually don't prefer sarcasm at all, but I did marry someone who can be very sarcastic. I think he's very tasteful in it, like he's not hurtful in it. He does it more to be funny. But when it becomes hurtful, I'll say, you have to stop talking like that, please, because it just like doesn't make me feel safe. It doesn't make me feel good. Thank you for respecting this. So practicing that, whatever it might be for you. I want you, number 3, to remember it's a skill. Implementing boundaries effectively takes skill set. It's something that's not taught in our culture. Hopefully, we're passing this on to our kids in like simple ways. And I know I do that very specifically with my teenagers, and I'm always like trying to grow in that area to pass that on to them. But drawing healthy boundaries takes awareness and practice, awareness and practice. And it's something that we have to master over time. And as we get good at it, we then uncover other layers and other layers, just like any skill set. And so the more that we draw healthy boundaries, the more effective we will become at doing so. And the more others around us will expect and respect these boundaries. I had about a very specific boundary with my sister, and she would ask my kids to babysit at night. And at first, I was allowing them to do that. So my older kids, but then she was not respecting the boundary of like, she'd say, I'm going to be home at 11:30. And then she'd get home at 1 or 1:30. It happened more than once. And my kids actually are not allowed to babysit at night anymore because it's just a boundary I just don't want to cross. I don't want to be up until 1:30, making sure they're coming back. And it was just something that she can't hold to. And so she actually doesn't even ask them to babysit at night anymore. She gets a babysitter that she pays for and all the things. And so it wasn't that comfortable at first because she was like, why can't your kids just help me out? And I just kept having to draw this boundary. Um, I like to think of skills, and especially even this boundary setting skill. If you're like, oh, I'm just not good at this, change it to this. This is just a skill, and I can get better at it. I love that thought. Whatever skill you're working on, this is just a skill, and I can get better at it. What is the one step that I can take today? What is the one thing that I can learn today? Maybe it's just awareness of like which boundaries are being crossed that I don't like, that doesn't serve me, that doesn't serve my family. Okay. And number 4, something that you guys are very familiar with, but design a self-image script around boundaries. I am a woman who's learning how to draw boundaries in order to protect my peace of mind and protect my vocation. You can insert whatever it is for you. I'm a woman who's learning how to draw boundaries in order to love my family. I'm a woman who's learning how to draw boundaries in order to become a peaceful mom, whatever it is you're working on. I'm a woman who is capable of drawing boundaries. I like to just speak those words into existence like I am capable. I'm totally capable of drawing boundaries. You are totally capable of drawing boundaries. I choose to not ruminate on negative thoughts because this pattern does not serve me. I'm grateful and choose to see the good in my life. Sometimes I use this script when I'm drawing boundaries because I'll think, I have a tendency because I'm a natural, a recovering people pleaser. And so when my thoughts want to go to ruminate, like, oh my gosh, she's going to be so mad at me and she's going to tell this person, or they're going to be mad at me, or da 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 da. I'll say, no, I choose to not ruminate on these negative thoughts because this pattern does not serve me. Okay. I'm super capable of drawing boundaries. I'm grateful and choose to see the good in my life. It just kind of like rewires and helps me to recalibrate. So these scripts in themselves, you can make them, you can turn them into one, but do something that serves you. Have a script card with it as you're working on this skill of boundaries. Who do we need to draw boundaries from? There might be other people that you would put in this category, but this is kind of a general, and like I think that everyone should draw boundaries from these type of people, toxic communities. That doesn't mean someone who's toxic, like in a certain area, doesn't mean you can never be friends with them. So I want to clarify that. I'm not saying this person over there, like X. There might be some people that you have to do that with, but it might just be like that one area. Oh my gosh, they're super toxic in there. They just go down this rabbit hole. It doesn't serve me, doesn't for my family. Okay. And so toxic people, toxic community, limited mindset people. We've talked about like having that fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. When you're around people that are just have this limited mindset, they're, um, basically meaning just very negative, maybe you even draw a boundary of like, okay, I can hang out with them for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is. And then I'm either going to shift the conversation or going to walk away. Because limited mindset, it actually creeps into us, and all the growth mindset that we're doing and learning, can be, we don't ever start back at square one, but it puts us steps back, and we could just be aware of that. Selfish tendencies. It is really challenging to be around selfish people. I find that now, in some ways, we can't like our kids could be selfish, or our husband, or I even myself could be selfish, but we want to really guard ourselves from selfish people that are just interested in their own, whether it's building up their own ego or their own interests. Like we can tap into that for a little bit, but we don't want to have that be our norm. Stressful people rub off on you, anxious people. And we want to just make sure that we guard ourselves, that we're not continuing to just be around stressful people. It's actually interesting. I had 2 basketball games yesterday for both my daughters that I was coaching. And so we drive our big van and I take all these kids, and all of a sudden I see this little girl, and she's like in the side of the van, like covered. And I just cut her out of the corner of my eye because I'm like driving, and I was like, what happened? It literally looked like someone died, or she got her arm like gashed open, like the tears, and and she said, I'm not laughing at her, but I really thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to pull over the car. Something major happened. So I said, honey, what's going on back there? And she was like, um, I dropped my earring. And I said, did you say you dropped my earring? She's like, I dropped the back to my earring. And I was like, for one, I took a deep breath. I was like, all right, I can keep driving here. But the intensity of this little girl, and obviously she's a little girl, and hopefully her parents, work through this. But I was like, honey, we can get on Amazon when we get there, or your parents can, and you can buy, 30 backs of earrings for like $3. You do not need to worry about that back of an earring. Like there's no reason, I'm just trying to like walk her off the cliff. That's a little kid like example. But for us as adults, like we need to steer clear of that. I could even tell my hope we were talking about it. So it's a girl that's in my daughter's class, and she was like, yeah, she tends to do that all the time, in school. So obviously I was like, yeah, that's something that she's working through. But I could tell like there's a natural boundary that even my daughter had of like even the other little girls in the car, like they already knew they didn't need to give into that or freak out, or like they just needed to let her process on her own. Okay, and number 5, disrespectful people. Disrespectful people, um, we can set a boundary and hold them accountable to that, but also we want to guard ourselves from that because that does not lead us anywhere good. We don't want our kids to be around disrespectful people. We don't want them to learn those behaviors, and we don't want ourselves to become immune to that. Okay, some key mindsets. I'm going to go through this quickly. It is our responsibility to clarify and communicate our boundaries. I just want you to remember that. Like it's our responsibility to do that. We cannot hold resentment when we failed to draw or communicate our boundaries. When someone crosses one of our boundaries, we must be detached to know that we can still hold firmly onto our boundary, even if it means a change in a relationship. So when someone crosses that boundary, it's not, sometimes we go into like, oh, I'm not creating good boundaries, like I'm not able to do this. No, we have to just stay detached that we can still hold firmly to our boundaries. It just might mean that we have to change that relationship. I had a friend, and I may have mentioned this because it's an example that I use and I still, tend to hold to this day. She loves to call me on the phone. She could talk to me all day on the phone about life, about her problems, about all the things. And I wanted to answer my phone for her. She's a good friend of mine. I've known her since I was in college. But I had to set a boundary like that I could only talk to her at 10 minutes at a time and like once a week because it was just negative. It did not serve me. It didn't serve my family. And so I began to do that. And we are still friends to this day, but it meant setting this boundary, like it changed our relationship in some ways. And she actually really respects that now. It's so easy for me to say, like, hey, I have 10 minutes. Tell me all the things in 10 minutes. And then when 10 minutes is up, all right, I'm off to make dinner, or I'm off to pick my kid up, or whatever it might be. Okay, another mindset for you. If someone apologizes for crossing a boundary, we should is kind of I always think of shoulds as like shaming, but it is necessary for us to forgive them. Why? Because we're called to forgive. That's a part of our road to to sanctity. And and to give them the benefit of the doubt that it's a learning process. However, I want to make this caveat that it's important to note that forgiveness does not mean that we can transgress our boundary. Forgiveness does not mean that we still don't hold boundaries for them. It's like someone that has, abused us in some way. And yes, we can forgive them, but it does not mean that we still don't hold a boundary so that that does not happen again. Okay, when someone or something crosses a standard that we have for our life, it's our responsibility to draw a boundary so that our peace, again, is not compromised. You find out that a friend has shared with others information that you shared with her in private. You then draw a boundary against sharing further personal information with her. As painful as that might be for you, maybe it actually will be very freeing, but it's our responsibility to do that, to set that boundary so that our peace is guarded. Mastering the art of drawing boundaries takes time and practice. Failure is a natural and even necessary step on the path to success. And it's an opportunity. I mean, I love the script that I give myself permission to fail and to learn from it. even in drawing boundaries that we might not say it right. Even if we say it like, and we're like, oh my gosh, I just drew that boundary. And that was like, I just said it in the most mean way. Even though you're like trying to work on it, you could go back to that person and be like, I'm so sorry. I'm really working on this. And I realized that my words didn't come off as I intended them to come off. We can always grow in humility. Failure is always a part of our success formula. Okay, our wholeness has to be our first priority because it's our vehicle to contribution. You guys know this. We cannot pour from an empty cup. Actually, we can sometimes for a week, 2 weeks, maybe. And if you're like really talented at it, for 6 months. But ultimately, it's going to result in overwhelm, anxiety, and not being able to step into the woman that God is calling us to be. So sometimes we have to draw boundaries against people or commitments that compromise that harmony within all of the arenas that make us up as a woman. Sometimes, I have to say no to things that I really want to do because it just is too compromising for the peace within our family at this time. It doesn't mean that I'll always have to do that. I love to travel for talks. There was a time when I had lots of littles where I had to say no to speaking engagements because it compromised the harmony and the stability with our family. Here's an example for you. You find that attending PTA meetings, to be incredibly stressful, and they have sustained, a negative impact on your mental health. Um, and so you get to choose to no longer attend those, even though you might be like, but they need me. But what comes first is prioritizing your health so that you can live out the vocation that you're called to live. And some seasons of our life were required firmer boundaries because our wholeness is less protected. Example, an easy example is when you just had, a baby. Maybe it was your first, second, third, fourth, whatever it is. And you're finding it, difficult to get enough sleep. You might have to create a boundary from socializing, in the evenings. Even I think of like for us now, like, I know we have some that are still having babies and very much in that baby stage. But if you're not in that baby stage, even going out late at night or watching a movie late at night, if we're specifically working on getting up early in the morning so that we can have peace within our family, then we have to set, a boundary like, hey, I'm not going to go to bed past 11, or I'm not going to watch any shows right now in this season of my life because I'm working on the discipline to guard my peace for the morning time, to be able to get up and to pray and do all the things, that my morning routine, that I'm striving for, that gives me so much joy. And it doesn't mean that you could never watch a movie. It does not mean that you can never watch a show. It means for this particular season. I actually, when I was doing that, it's very real to me. Before when I discovered just this work and the dreaming and the designing and how to do all this stuff, I would say that I was definitely like a Netflix binger. Like I loved me getting in a good series and I would watch episode after episode after episode. I just couldn't get enough. And then when it was over, I was like, oh, what's the next one I'm going to get into? And so for me, I had to, because became habitual and it was just something that like I'm easily addicted to. And I know that about myself. I actually, I can't remember the last time I watched like, a series of something, but I, for like 3 years, I did not do that. I did not get on Netflix. It was hard at first, and then it just became the norm, and my life became so much more freer. But I actually know now that if like I were to do that, it'd probably be like over vacation, and it'd be something that like maybe my husband and I would do for fun. But it's just not a part of who I am or what I do because I just set a boundary, like an interior boundary for myself. Because I had things I wanted to do. I wanted to work on my marriage. I wanted to, work on being a peaceful mom. And that became so much more important to me than watching my Netflix series. Okay. When there is resentment against a commitment or a person, it is a sure sign that our peace and our wholeness is being compromised. Check yourself with that. When you have resentment against a commitment that you're supposed to be doing, that you want to be doing, that you've committed to, something's out of line. Something's out of line for you. Okay. You're feeling resentful towards your mother-in-law when she drops in unannounced for visits. and you communicate with her that you're drawing a boundary that she must tell you when she's coming over in order to protect your relationship. Now, you would get to decide how to do that. You might have your husband do that. I don't know. If you just had a baby and you're just like, don't have all the things, like you're like, actually, can you just tell your mom and dad that I think I remember doing this? Like, you just tell mom and dad that they just can't stop over whenever. I actually don't necessarily care about that now. But at that moment, that's what I needed, you know? And so when you're feeling resentful towards someone, it usually means that a boundary needs to be set, and you get to discover what that is. Okay, I also want to tell you that when you're doing when you're working on the skill of boundaries, there is something to like getting very specific about mindset and the tools for that. I do offer private coaching, you know, it's an extra thing, but if you ever are like, hey, I want to dive into this, let's do this. I'll put that in just on a attachment with the email as far as signing up, you know, whether it's for a 4-pack of coaching with me, so that we can go through some of these very specific things and get to the mindsets that you're needing, you know, get to the coaching, the strategy that you're needing, because sometimes it's hard, not sometimes, I would say most times, like 99% of the time, when we're in the middle of it, to see outside of it. And so that's why we need a coach, or maybe it's a dear friend, you know, that can help walk you through it. Um, but some of the questions that I would have you even ask yourselves is, where do I need to hold an interior boundary? And then asking yourselves, when I talked about the, you know, the 4 steps, what strategy do I need? What self-image script do I need? You know, what skill? Whether it's even like that interior boundary, like, you know, that I'm working on the skill of drawing boundaries. And then what script do I need? And then for that inner circle, you know, your husbands, your kids, close family, close friends. Okay, where do I need to draw a boundary? And I would start with one area, you know, what's the one that's most pressing right now? And then develop the strategy, you know, the self-image, the skill, and the script. Where do I need to draw an outer circle boundary? You know, family, school, community, church, friends. What strategy, what skill, what script do I need? You can even, you know, add one more to that. Maybe it's like for your working environment, you know, which would be, sometimes you could consider it like that inner circle because you're there however many hours a day that you're there. But it could also, you could take it into that, you know, outer circle too, because we know that like our work, not everyone gets to come into that inner circle with us, if that makes sense. Okay, that was a lot, my friends. It is an hour had passed. So I just don't know how that happened. But any questions for me? I guess there's just 2 of you that are left on the call. Janine, Eileen, any questions for me as we kind of close up? I know I gave you a ton to harvest from, a ton to think about. Anything stick out?
I found it really helpful. It's a big area for me.
Mhm,
Um, but I like the 4 ways
mhm.
to help for boundaries. 'Cause I think a lot of that is kind of what weighs on my mind at times.
Yeah,
So I found it really helpful. I think I might be interested in doing like a private coaching, just
sure.
zone in on that. But it was great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I do think it's important, like, to have like a full, you know, hour to just be able to uncover that. So I love that. Did you feel like when you were saying that the 4 parts of, you know, how to do it gave you that how?
Yes.
That's what
Yeah.
you were looking for.
And I
Yeah.
think it's also like the mindset,
Mhm.
like my scripts, and also the way I'm thinking. And I like also just kind of like thinking, is this serving me?
Mhm.
Like if you have a tendency to think about it and address if there is resentment that I need to, it's on my heart that I need to work on that. So
Yeah.
and I think it's pretty common with people with family. It's like, I can do it. I have a easier time outside of that. even my coworkers, I just say it pretty straightforward, but family, it's like touchy. It's like I don't want to hurt
Sure.
anybody,
Hmm.
you know, but
Yeah.
yeah,
And there's usually people like that's a good like distinction. Like there's usually some areas that we're better at drawing boundaries and the others that we're not. Because I actually find that I'm better at drawing boundaries with my family than I am with other people. Because I don't want to
Mhm.
hurt those other people's feelings, or there's just something about it for me. And so that's a good distinction that you're like, okay, this is the area, that I need to work on, that I want to work on is with my family. And that even after, diving into it here, that it's so that you can have better relationships with your family.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, Janine says, I like the I am capable script. Yes. It's just that reminder of like, you are totally capable of drawing boundaries. And she also says, I find, and I know we've talked about it, but I find it hard to set boundaries with work. Yes. And so Janine, that would probably be your area. And um, it's actually interesting because I'll find that as well. And what it does is like when we set boundaries and the first time that we do it, it can be really painful. Like we can't, if we were to just follow our feelings are so important. Don't get me wrong. But if we were just to follow our feelings all the time, like it would create like mayhem. We have to know that our feelings come from what we're thinking, right? So what we think about creates how we feel, and how we feel then, creates how we show up, and how we show up creates our life. And so when even for me, when I made the big decision not to coach the varsity girls that I've been doing for, 2-3 years, and they're going to be seniors this year, it did not feel good. It was drawing a boundary. It was protecting like my inner peace with my family. Like it did not feel good. And it doesn't always still feel good, but I know it's the right thing. And I have so much evidence in my brain of like, no, no, no. I was like totally able to draw that boundary. And when I do it again for the sake of my family or whatever that season of my life is, I'll be able to fall back on like that really big time that I, did that. And that's what it does. It's like building blocks for it. And so, Janine, yes, when the first time that you'll say no to something with work, and you'll have the fear that, well, maybe they won't hire me again, or they're going to find someone else, or I'm not going to get the money for that, I want. You're going to experience all those things. And that's where you just like get to hold yourself and like hold your baby, talk to your husband, and then, it builds upon that as you're creating more peace then for your family and connection with your husband, you're like, okay, this was worth it, like in this season, because this season's a little bit more crazy than this is a dance party, as January would say, like this is a dance party. And so, yeah, totally. But you are capable. All right, ladies. So great. I'm so glad that you are here. And I will see you on Monday. I will give anyone a chance to like ask any more questions about this. But then we are gonna dive into oh my gosh. I keep getting it confused. I'm pretty sure we're diving into, I think, contribution. I have to look back. It's either contribution or environment. So, okay. I hope that this serves you. I'll send out the recording so you have it. You can kind of like look back through it. All right, ladies. God bless you. Bye.